May 4, 2025, the Allianz Arena. Bayern Munich clinches the Bundesliga title, their 12th championship in 13 seasons. Confetti falls, champagne flows, and the trophy is raised. Vincent Kompany, the 39-year-old Belgian manager, who arrived just 11 months earlier under a cloud of skepticism, stands on the touchline with arms raised. The celebration feels different this time. Not muted, not subdued, triumphant, because everyone watching knows the truth. Bayern Munich, despite years of critical errors that threatened to dismantle their status as a European powerhouse, had clawed their way back. Just 1 year earlier, Bayern had suffered one of the most humiliating seasons in their modern history. Finishing third in the Bundesliga for the first time in over a decade, watching Bayer Leverkusen claim the title with a record-breaking invincible season, the mighty Bavarians had been dethroned. Thomas Tuchel's tenure ended in mutual frustration, and the club's desperate search for a replacement became a public spectacle. Xabi Alonso declined. Julian Nagelsmann declined. Ralf Rangnick declined. 8 candidates in total said no to Bayern Munich. Then they turned to Vincent Kompany, a manager who had just overseen Burnley's relegation from the Premier League with a club record low of 24 points. The appointment was met with widespread ridicule. Critics questioned whether a manager whose tactical naivety had been exposed in England could possibly succeed at one of Europe's elite clubs. But here's the thing, Bayern didn't have a choice. They had burned through managers, alienated candidates, and created an environment of chaos. Kompany wasn't plan A. He wasn't even plan H, but he was the one who said yes. So the question becomes, how did a club of Bayern's stature, a club with 6 Champions League titles, annual revenues exceeding €744 million, and a history of ruthless efficiency, find itself in this position? How did they survive their own mistakes? And perhaps most importantly, have they actually learned anything? The first mistake was arrogance, overconfidence. They believed the Bayern Munich model was so superior, so flawless, that they could act with a level of audacity other clubs could never dare to match. For years, it worked. Bayern masterfully applied the art of dismantling local rivals. Götze, Lewandowski, Hummels from Dortmund, Upamecano from Leipzig. The model was clear: identify the best players in Germany, wait for their contracts to expire or activate their release clauses, then incorporate them into the Bayern machine. But while Bayern was busy cannibalizing the Bundesliga, the rest of Europe was evolving. Manchester City, under Pep Guardiola, had transformed into a tactical juggernaut, winning the treble in 2023. Real Madrid, despite their aging squad, pulled off one of the greatest transfer coups in modern football by signing Kylian Mbappe. Liverpool rebuilt. Arsenal ascended. Even clubs like Newcastle were throwing money Bayern couldn't match. And what was Bayern doing? They were operating under the assumption that their model of financial restraint and Bundesliga dominance would be enough. The second mistake was catastrophic succession planning. Between 2013 and 2020, Bayern Munich had one of the most formidable squads in world football. Lahm, Schweinsteiger, Robben, Ribéry, Lewandowski, Neuer. These weren't just great players, they were generational talents who defined an era. But here's the thing about generational talents, they age, and when they do, you need to have a plan. Bayern didn't. When Frank Ribéry and Arjen Robben left in 2019, the club signed Leroy Sané for €49 million, but he never replicated their consistency. When Robert Lewandowski departed for Barcelona in 2022, Bayern replaced him with Sadio Mané, brilliant, but 30 years old and declining. Then they spent €100 million on Harry Kane in 2023, another aging striker. Yes, Kane was phenomenal. He'd go on to score 44 goals in his debut season, but the pattern was clear. Bayern was buying established stars instead of developing long-term solutions. Compare this to Real Madrid's approach. When Cristiano Ronaldo left in 2018, Madrid endured difficult years but used that time to rebuild with Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo, Camavinga, Tchouaméni, and Bellingham, players under 25 who could define a decade. Bayern kept chasing short-term fixes. The third mistake was managerial chaos. Between 2021 and 2024, Bayern cycled through 4 head coaches: Hansi Flick, Julian Nagelsmann, Thomas Tuchel, and back to Tuchel again after initially sacking him. 4 different philosophies, 4 different tactical systems, complete instability. Hansi Flick left in 2021 after clashing with sporting director Hasan Salihamidzic. Nagelsmann was sacked in March 2023, despite being on course to win the Bundesliga. Tuchel was brought in mid-season, won the title, then presided over the disastrous 2023-24 campaign, where Bayern finished third. The club sacked him, couldn't find a replacement, rehired him, then sacked him again. It was a circus. This revolving door created an identity crisis. What was Bayern's style? High press? Possession-based? Counter-attacking? Nobody knew. And when Bayer Leverkusen went unbeaten for an entire season in 2023-24, finishing 18 points ahead of Bayern, the cracks became chasms. So 3 massive mistakes: hubris, failed succession planning, and managerial chaos. Anyone could destabilize a club. Bayern accumulated all 3 simultaneously, yet somehow they survived. The question is, how? The answer lies in 3 factors. ruthlessness, structural overhaul, and an unlikely hero. First, ruthlessness. Bayern Munich doesn't do sentimentality. When the 2023-24 season collapsed, heads rolled. Sporting director Salihamidzic was dismissed. Tuchel was dismissed twice. Max Eberl, former Borussia Mönchengladbach director, was installed as the new board member for sport alongside Christoph Freund. The message was clear: no more excuses, no more half measures, either deliver or leave. This cold efficiency extended to transfers. Bayern signed João Palhinha from Fulham for €50 million, Michael Olise from Crystal Palace, and Hiroki Ito from Stuttgart. They offloaded Matthias de Ligt and Noussair Mazraoui to Manchester United for €60 million combined, players who had underperformed and needed fresh starts. Second, the structural overhaul. Eberl and Freund implemented a clear philosophy: attack-minded football with high pressing and player development. They extended contracts for young talents like Matthias Tell and Alexander Nubel, committing to a long-term vision. They gave Kompany the tools and autonomy previous managers hadn't received. It was a bet on stability over star power. Third, Vincent Kompany turned out to be the unlikely hero. The man everyone doubted arrived with a 2-4-4 formation that seemed reckless. His defensive line was higher than even Pep Guardiola's during his Bayern tenure, a strategy that left them vulnerable to counterattacks. But here's what nobody expected: it worked. Bayern's attacking output exploded. They scored 99 goals in the 2024-25 Bundesliga season while conceding just 32. They dominated possession at 64%. They pressed relentlessly, and they won. Kompany's Bayern began the season with 4 consecutive victories, scoring 16 goals. They obliterated Dinamo Zagreb 9-2 in the Champions League. Kompany became the first manager in history to oversee a team scoring 9 goals in a single Champions League match. By matchday 14, they'd only lost once. By May 4, 2025, they were champions, losing only twice in 34 league matches, the best defensive record since Carlo Ancelotti's 2016-17 team. But it wasn't just results. Kompany revitalized players. Serge Gnabry, frozen out under Tuchel, returned to form. Kingsley Coman found new life. Jamal Musiala evolved into one of Europe's most complete midfielders, crediting Kompany's coaching for pushing him to improve in areas I didn't even know I could. Harry Kane, despite being 31, scored relentlessly, setting new Bundesliga records. Dayot Upamecano, often criticized, became a defensive anchor. The success was so undeniable that on October 21, 2025, Bayern extended Kompany's contract until 2029. The club that had cycled through managers like disposable razors suddenly found stability. But here's where the story gets complicated, because surviving isn't the same as thriving, and winning the Bundesliga doesn't erase the mistakes of the past, it just delays the consequences. In the Champions League, Bayern's vulnerabilities were exposed. They dominated the group stage, scoring 20 goals in their first 3 matches, but in the knockout rounds they faced Inter Milan in the quarter-finals and lost 4-3 on aggregate. A narrow defeat, yes, but a defeat nonetheless. For the 3rd consecutive season, Bayern failed to reach the Champions League semi-finals. That's not a bug, it's a pattern. The high defensive line Kompany deployed, while devastating in the Bundesliga, proved exploitable against elite European opposition. Bayern conceded goals on the counter, the same vulnerability that plagued them under previous managers. The philosophy was bold, but it had limits. And then there's the 2025-26 season, the present moment. At present, Bayern Munich is dominating German football in a way we haven't seen for years. They've won 13 of their first 15 Bundesliga matches, sit 9 points clear at the top, and have scored 55 goals while conceding just 11. They broke AC Milan's record for the best start in Europe's top 5 leagues, winning their first 16 competitive matches of the season. Harry Kane is on pace to shatter multiple Bundesliga records. Everything looks perfect, but this is where Bayern's history becomes a warning. Because this isn't the first time they've dominated domestically while struggling in Europe. The question isn't whether Bayern can win the Bundesliga, they've proven they can do that in their sleep. The question is whether they've actually fixed the problems that prevented them from competing at the highest level. Consider the evidence. Bayern's success in 2024-25 came during a transitional year for their rivals. Bayer Leverkusen, the team that humiliated them the previous season, experienced a Champions League hangover and couldn't replicate their invincible form. Borussia Dortmund remained inconsistent. RB Leipzig and Eintracht Frankfurt were competitive but lacked depth. Bayern essentially reclaimed the throne during a power vacuum. In Europe, though, Manchester City remains a juggernaut. Real Madrid has Mbappé, Vinicius, and Bellingham firing on all cylinders. Arsenal is stronger than ever. Inter Milan proved they could outthink Bayern tactically. And Bayern's quarter-final exit in 2024-25 suggests that while Kompany has solved domestic problems, the European puzzle remains unsolved. There's also the matter of squad aging. Harry Kane is 32, Manuel Neuer is 39. Thomas Müller retired at the end of last season, taking with him 34 major trophies and irreplaceable leadership. Leroy Sané and Kingsley Coman both departed this summer. Sané to Galatasaray, Coman to Al Nassr. The core is changing, and while Bayern has recruited well, the cycle of aging stars continues. So where does that leave Bayern now? Have they actually learned from their mistakes, or have they just gotten lucky during a weak period for German football? The truth is complicated. Bayern has made tangible improvements. The managerial stability under Kompany is real. The structural changes implemented by Eberl and Freund show long-term thinking. The attacking philosophy is exhilarating and effective. These aren't superficial fixes, they're genuine progress. But the fundamental test remains. Can Bayern win the Champions League? Can they prove they're not just the biggest fish in a small pond, but a genuine threat on the European stage? Bayern Munich has survived its own mistakes, but survival isn't success, it's a reprieve, a chance to rebuild, to learn, to evolve. The question is whether they'll use this opportunity to genuinely fix their structural flaws, or whether they'll fall back into the same patterns of hubris, short-term thinking and managerial chaos that nearly destroyed them. At the moment, Bayern Munich seem unbeatable. They are top of the Bundesliga. They have broken records. Vincent Kompany has a contract until 2029. Everything seems perfect. But we've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. The only question is, will Bayern rewrite the script or repeat the same mistakes? Only time will tell.